The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Keith Tebow at FRC Media. You know, each election season we try to bring you as much information as possible so you can make informed choices when you go to the polls. And what we've done for a lot of the state elections is we try to spend some time not only speaking to candidates that are on the ballot, but also the ballot initiatives that state voters will be considering. There are 5 ballot initiatives on this year's state ballot. We're going to focus today on question 2. Now, question 2, if passed, would eliminate the requirement that students pass the Massachusetts Comprehensive Assessment System, or MCAS test, in order to graduate high school. Today we're going to look at those who are opposed to question 2, and I'm pleased to be joined by someone many of you know, former mayor of Fall River, school committee member, and also state representative. He's now the executive director of the Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education. That's a mouthful. Former Mayor Ed Lambert. Mayor, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Keith, it's great to be with you here, and thanks for the work that you all continue to do here to educate voters. I think it's really important. As a Fall River resident in particular, I'm just really proud of the consistency and the work that's been done here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, I want to get into some specifics, but, you know, if you're in the elevator and someone knows that, hey, here's Ed Lambert, he wants people to vote no on question 2 in terms of limiting MCAS, what would you tell people?
Well, I think it's very simple. Right now we have standards in Massachusetts that have helped our state become first in the nation. If you go back 30 years, when I was in the legislature and we passed the Ed Reform Law, there were a number of reforms initiated at that time, along with significant new state money to help make sure that places like Fall River and New Bedford would get the resources that they need. It's kind of the first of the grand bargains. But in that, what we determined was, for greater equity and for greater quality of educational experience, we should have high expectations for all students, not just for some. And so we need to measure student progress. We need a common assessment to do that. One of the reforms in there was the MCAS exam. And as part of that, what we determined was, rather than having 300 different local graduation standards, we would have a state graduation standard, and we would help every student achieve that standard. And that has worked. That piece of the Ed Reform Law took effect about 10 years after the passage of the law in 2003. And when it did, MCAS scores shot up, graduation rates have gone up, dropout rates have gone down, and student achievement has improved for all students, both collectively and within certain subgroups of students. And Massachusetts, since '93, has gone from being about the middle of the pack nationally to first in the nation. We don't want to go back. We don't want to dismantle some of the reforms that we think have produced a strong public education system in Massachusetts.
Those who are in support of the measure, it's heavily backed by the Teachers Association, the MTA. They're the key driver in this. They talk about, we've heard it here many times, that a lot of times teachers are teaching to the test and they can't be as creative in terms of their lesson plans and their curriculum because of the standard. How do you reply to that? Well,
we don't agree. And if you talk to a lot of teachers, there are a lot of teachers who don't necessarily agree with the union's position on this. The test, the MCAS test, the questions aren't made up in New Jersey, or they don't come from the planet Mars. They actually come from teachers across Massachusetts, who every couple of years the state brings together and asks the question, what do students need to be successful when they graduate? So teachers develop those standards, and then the test is connected directly to those standards. So when we say, well, we're teaching to the test, we're doing what teachers always do if they're giving a science midterm. Before that science midterm, they're teaching the content that is going to be measured by that test. The best way for students to succeed is to have quality teaching throughout. And so there's no doubt that strong schools, strong classrooms are able to teach that content. The exam is focused on English, math, and science. And in addition to that, provide all of the other types of things that we think it's important to round out a student's educational experience to make them successful.
Yeah. You know, one of the other issues is there's talk, especially in gateway cities like Fall River, New Bedford, and even the larger cities, Boston, Worcester, Springfield, is that there's a disadvantage because of low educational attainment, just the demographics of these cities, that there's more instances where students on the local level are passing proficiencies, but this is their only hurdle. I guess, is there a way for a compromise here potentially? I mean, I guess how has MCAS actually been advancing through the years, the past 20 years or so, to meet some of these challenges?
Well, certainly the exam itself continues to be improved. The state is now using new technologies to do problem simulation. So it's not just the old paper and pencil test that people might recall that they'd taken in prior years. But the fact is that with this opportunity to assess student progress, we see an equity that didn't exist before 1993. This belief that maybe students from Fall River, New Bedford couldn't meet the grade, right? And that in some districts and in some schools, getting by was just good enough. Just let's get them across the stage, right? Where in other communities, it was about students getting ahead. That equity issue has been solved in part because we now have the same high expectation for every student. Secretary of Education Pat Tutwiler in Massachusetts, a person of color, someone who has been a superintendent and a high school principal, is strongly opposed to this, as is Governor Healy. And what he had said is the kids who will suffer most if this standard is eliminated are the kids who from economically distressed communities like Lynn, where he was superintendent, for whom we will lower expectations, for whom we will say, well, they just can't get there, they just can't pass it. Statewide, 90% of students pass the MCAS exam on the first try at the 10th grade level. Students have 5 opportunities to pass the exam before they graduate. If for some reason they might be test phobic or they're not able to, there are alternatives to taking the exam. There's a portfolio process where students can appeal and get their diploma that way. So there are a number of ways, and in fact, less than 1% of all students are denied a diploma, about 700 or less. What Secretary Tutwiler says is every one of those students is capable. We need to figure out not to eliminate a standard for 70,000 students a year, but how are we going to address the needs of those 700 to get them across that finish line.
Now, in terms of the test itself, if this were to pass, then it would fall upon local school districts to sort of set their own standards in conjunction with the Department of Education, elementary and secondary education in Massachusetts. What would be so bad with that?
Well, the fact is that you would have over 300 different standards. If you look now at local graduation standards, they're all over the place. Some districts require foreign language, some don't. Some require 4 years of math, some require 2. And not only would the standards be different, but grading practices are different from one district to the next. Sometimes there are grading practices that are different within a school. One teacher grades one way, so the luck of the draw would be, well, you get a certain teacher, maybe you'll graduate. Having a common standard helps tell parents exactly how their students are doing on a common measuring stick. We don't have a moving target depending on what school you go to or what district you go to. And we think that's really important. In fact, if this question passes, Massachusetts will become one of only 2 states in the country without any single statewide graduation standard. The only standard we will still have on the books is that students take 4 years of phys ed. And our standards would actually be lower than Alabama, Mississippi, and some other states that we often choose not to compare ourselves to.
Yeah. In your role with the Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education, you talk with a lot of businesses. I believe most or all of the chambers of commerce, I believe, are also against this measure. What are their needs in terms of where they want their employees to be educationally, and how can eliminating MCAS possibly impact that?
Well, and that's a great question. And so business leaders and the organization that I represent, of course, are also concerned about constrictions in the talent pipeline. If you look potentially even post-COVID, the workforce challenges ahead in Massachusetts are pretty intense and severe. And so we want to make sure that the standards stay high in schools across Massachusetts. So yes, so one South Coast chamber, most of the chambers of commerce, most of the business industry sectors are opposed to the question. But to be clear, when those business leaders, and this organization actually played a key role 30 years ago in bringing about the Ed Reform Act, it wasn't just about the talent pipeline, it was also about equity. You can't have a strong Commonwealth if you have different educational standards for students based on where they live, or their zip code, and things like that. We should have a single high standard for every student to achieve, and then it's our responsibility to make sure those students can achieve that standard.
Has there been any surveying done of school districts? I know here in Fall River, the Fall River School Committee voted in favor of voting yes on question 2. Are there maybe smaller community? Again, the issue of equity came up as well with the Fall River School Committee. Are there school districts that are on the no side that you know of that may be able to lend some credence to the argument?
We have educators and teachers who have joined us in opposition. The Mass Association of School Superintendents took a position against the ballot question. So certainly while there might be educators here and there and on different positions, it's hard to expect a rank and file teacher in a school to go against their union or their union position. So we've been just try to be very focused on what are the needs here. 30 years ago, we put these requirements in place. It wasn't just business leaders, civil rights groups and others understood this as an equity issue. And that coalition continues to build. We have parents, particularly parents of special needs students, who don't want standards watered down for their students, right? Who don't want to say, well, because my child is a special needs child, you're going to put them in a different path. You're going to say that they cannot pass the exam, as opposed to helping them meet that standard. And so we just think that's really important. And look, respectfully, what I would say to the Fall River School Committee and/or others, and I serve there, so I understand you always have to, make your best effort to come up with a decision on this. That the equity imperative is really on the no side to this. It's not equitable to hand a student a diploma that might not be worthwhile in terms of indicating their ability to be successful going forward. You'll get them through school, but when they go to college or when they go to work and they're unprepared because they haven't met that academic standard, you haven't been equitable for them at all. So I think that we believe that the right move with regard to equity for students is ensuring that we put the resources and the time into making sure they all achieve high standards.
I know you don't represent the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, but are there opportunities here, maybe because this will be, in the statewide media over the next couple of months, that even if this were to fail, or even if it were to pass, that there are going to be some conversations between the two groups to say, hey, let's maybe bring it back, but with changes?
I think you always want to try to improve, and I agree that should always be part of the process. We've looked at what other states do. Many maintain an exam but have some other elements. I think you could see that kind of thing. The earning of an industry-recognized credential, a work-based learning experience, earning some college credit. There are other ways in which you can also show that you could be successful post-graduation, and I think folks are very open to that. But that's a real key part of this question, and it's an important one for folks to consider. Voting yes, if this question were to pass, the elimination of MCAS is not replaced by anything. No. And so that's why we really probably should not do complex policy questions, particularly on education policy, by the ballot. So I think that those conversations would be more than welcome. We want to continue to evolve and improve, but just eliminating it without replacing it with anything, I think would be a serious mistake.
One thing important to note is the passage of this measure will not eliminate the tests. It's just that the requirement for graduation would be the only thing that would be eliminated. So it's not like the test would go away. Test would still be there, would still be a tool for communities to use.
Thanks, Keith. That's a great point. And in fact, for those who just think that, well, maybe I don't like MCAS as a test, but maybe they could use another test because I don't think it's a good test. Right. The ballot question, just so that folks know, would prohibit the use of any state assessment or any district-wide assessment for use in determining graduation competency. So we just think that would be a mistake.
All right. Former Mayor Lambert, I appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education. He's the Executive Director. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Keith. Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us here on FRC Media. And please make a point to vote on Tuesday, November 5th.